The rain had begun just as dusk fell, a steady drizzle that slicked the city streets with a mirror-like sheen. Neon signs flickered in the puddles, distorted and quivering with each ripple, their colors smeared across the asphalt like paint left to run. She pulled the collar of her coat higher, shielding her neck from the cold droplets that clung stubbornly to her skin. Every footstep echoed in the narrow alleyways, sharp and insistent, as though the city itself were listening to her movements. She had been drawn here by chance or perhaps by something more elusive, something magnetic she could not name. The alley seemed to fold in on itself, dark and secretive, lined with brick walls streaked with the memories of years, faded graffiti, remnants of forgotten posters, the scent of damp and decay. There was a quiet intimacy in its shadows, a promise that the world beyond these walls did not exist, that she could disappear here and no one would notice. A flicker of movement caught her eye, and she paused, heart tightening in anticipation. A figure emerged from the darkness, barely more than a silhouette, yet familiar in a way that made her chest ache with an unexpected tension. He moved with fluid confidence, steps silent against the wet cobblestones, as if he belonged here in the shadows. "You're late," he murmured, his voice low and rough, carrying with it the warmth of something unspoken, something that lingered between them like smoke. "I lost track of time," she replied, voice steadier than she felt, though a shiver traced her spine. Her fingers itched to touch the warmth she imagined behind his coat, though she knew better than to act too soon. The alleyway seemed to pulse around them, a living thing, pressing in close, demanding their attention. He stepped closer, and she could smell the faint tang of rain mixed with something more intoxicating, something uniquely his. The space between them felt charged, electric, as if the darkness itself had conspired to bring them here, to this precise moment. She felt it in her pulse, in the quickening beat of her heart that threatened to betray her calm exterior. "I wondered if you'd come," he said, and there was a teasing edge to his tone, a danger she was equally drawn to and wary of. The alley swallowed the sound of their words, leaving only the patter of rain and the distant hum of city life beyond the walls. She dared to study him in the dim light, noticing the angular planes of his face, the way his eyes glimmered in the half-shadow. He radiated a confidence that made her breath hitch, a presence that seemed to claim the space around him without apology. "Why here?" she asked, finally, unable to keep the tremor from her voice. The alley felt like a stage set for something forbidden, a private world separated from the mundane, and the very isolation of it made her pulse race. "Because some things can't be said in daylight," he replied, a hint of a smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "Some things need to be felt." The words sent a shiver down her spine. She had felt the pull from the first time their paths crossed, a magnetic force that neither distance nor caution could diminish. And now, in the quiet intimacy of this hidden passage, it pressed against her inescapably. Without thinking, she closed the gap between them, drawn forward by something neither of them named. The rain traced paths down their coats, pooling at the edges of the collar, dripping onto the cobblestones below. He lifted a hand, brushing a strand of wet hair from her face, fingers lingering too long, sending sparks of warmth shooting through her. The world outside the alley ceased to exist. The hum of the city faded, leaving only the two of them, suspended in the tension that seemed to cling to the damp air. Every heartbeat, every breath, felt amplified. Shadows danced around them, flickering with the neon reflections, and in the depths of that darkness, there was a promise dangerous, irresistible, intoxicating. She didn't know what would happen next, nor did she care. For the first time in a long while, she surrendered to the pull, to the thrill of being unseen yet entirely noticed, to the electric touch that promised more than words could ever convey. The alleyway had become their secret, a world carved from shadows and rain, and she knew that stepping further into it meant crossing a line from which there was no return. And still, she stepped forward. The rain had softened into a gentle mist, leaving the alley cloaked in a silvery haze. She could barely make out the faint outlines of the bricks, slick and darkened by hours of moisture. Every drop that clung to her hair and coat felt like a shiver running down her spine, each one drawing her closer to him, to the magnetic pull that refused to be denied. He didn't speak immediately, letting the silence stretch, heavy with anticipation. His presence was all-encompassing, a force that made her hyper-aware of every inch of her body, every subtle movement, every involuntary quickening of her pulse. She felt it in her chest, a tightening that was equal parts fear and thrill, a delicious tension that made her toes curl in her boots against the wet cobblestones. Finally, he spoke, voice low and deliberate, cutting through the mist. "Do you know why I brought you here?" She shook her head, her lips parting slightly. I thought maybe you did." He stepped closer, the space between them narrowing, until the faint warmth of his body brushed against hers through their soaked coats. The sensation was electric, igniting a fire she didn't know how to control. Her hand itched to reach for him, to explore the heat she could feel even through layers of fabric, but she hesitated, caught between desire and the dangerous thrill of restraint. "I needed you somewhere no one could see," he murmured, fingers brushing the edge of her jaw, tracing the damp strands of hair that clung to her skin. "Somewhere we could exist without rules, without eyes, or judgment. Just us." The words were a whisper against the fog of rain, yet they resonated deep inside her, stirring something she hadn't felt in years, a reckless abandon, a freedom that came with surrendering to the moment. Her breath hitched as she looked into his eyes, trying to read the storm behind them, the promise he carried, the danger he masked beneath calm control. Slowly, deliberately, he reached for her hand, fingers sliding around hers with a confidence that made her ache to melt into him. He led her further down the alley, deeper into the shadows where the mist swallowed them almost completely. The world beyond the streets, the neon signs, the indifferent city ceased to exist. They were alone, encased in a private world of rain, stone, and desire. "Tell me," he said, his voice barely above the whisper of falling droplets, "do you ever think about what could happen if we let ourselves?" Her pulse surged. "All the time," she admitted, voice trembling, though not from fear alone. "But I don't know if I should." A laugh, low and teasing, escaped him, and it wrapped around her like a caress. "The question isn't whether you should," he said, closing the last sliver of space between them, "it's whether you can resist." She couldn't. The moment their bodies finally met in the narrow alleyway, the restraint she had clung to melted away. His hands traced the curve of her back, pressing her closer until the wetness of their coats melded together, skin against fabric, heat against heat. Her own fingers tangled in the lapels of his coat, desperate for connection, desperate for the thrill that pulsed between them like a live wire. The air was thick with tension, heavy with the scent of rain and him, earthy, warm, intoxicating. She felt his lips near her ear, a whisper of a breath that made her knees weaken. "Do you feel it?" he murmured. "The way the shadows watch us, the way the night holds its breath." "Yes," she whispered, almost inaudibly, her voice lost in the mist but caught in the intimacy of his presence. She could feel it too, the alley alive around them, charged with the secrets of countless nights and stolen moments, as if it existed solely for encounters like this. A sudden shiver passed over her, not from the cold, but from the thrill of exposure. The risk of being caught, of stepping beyond societal bounds, made her pulse hammer even faster. And he seemed to sense it, pressing a hand to her cheek, thumb brushing softly over damp skin. "I want to know everything about you," he said, voice husky with need. "I want to feel it all, the hesitation, the surrender, the fire underneath." She gasped as he drew closer, their foreheads touching, breaths mingling, hearts racing in tandem. The mist swirled around them, a curtain shielding their secret from the city beyond. For a fleeting, exquisite moment, nothing existed except the rain, the shadows, and the electric heat of proximity. Then, just as suddenly as it began, the spell of anticipation deepened, leaving them both on the brink, teetering between the thrill of desire and the danger that hung in the dark alley like a predator waiting for a mistake. And somewhere in that shadowed world, she knew that crossing the next line would change everything. But in the haze of rain, in the magnetic pull of his gaze, in the tantalizing brush of his hands, she no longer cared. The shadows were watching. And so was she. The alley seemed to contract around them, walls pressing closer as the mist thickened, cloaking everything in a hazy secrecy. Each step she took sent a soft splash through shallow puddles, the sound oddly intimate in the quiet world they had carved out. He didn't rush her, but the heat in his gaze and the subtle brush of his fingers against hers made every movement feel charged, deliberate, like a slow ignition of something dangerous yet irresistible. "Do you trust me?" he asked, voice low, almost a growl, vibrating through the air between them. She hesitated, heart pounding. Trust was a fragile thing, and yet in this narrow, rain-slicked passage, she felt it stretching taut between them, as if the alley itself demanded surrender. I think I do," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. She knew that she was already lost, but to say it aloud made it official, like signing a contract she didn't fully understand. He smiled then, a slow, knowing curve of his lips that sent a shiver down her spine. "Good," he said, "because there's no turning back now." The rain had slowed to a drizzle, leaving a faint, clinging dampness on their clothes and hair. Every droplet glistened on their skin like a spark, catching the dim glow of neon that flickered from the street beyond. In the haze, he reached for her again, this time with a bolder certainty, sliding his hand around her waist and pressing her closer. She felt the taut strength of him, the warmth radiating from his body, and the pulse of his heartbeat in rhythm with her own. "Shadows have a way of hiding things," he whispered, tilting her chin up so their eyes met. "But they also reveal what the light refuses to show." She swallowed, the words striking a chord deep inside her. She had always been drawn to shadows, the hidden, the forbidden, the unspoken. And now, standing here in the alley, she realized the truth of his words. The shadows were revealing her, revealing him, revealing them. Her fingers trailed along the line of his coat, then over the edge of his collar, exploring the texture of fabric and skin beneath. He responded with a soft hum, a sound that vibrated through her chest, drawing her even closer. Each touch was deliberate, measured, teasing. Every inch of space between them was electric, charged with anticipation. "Do you feel it?" he murmured against her ear, breath warm, scent mingling with the damp air. "The pull, the danger, the thrill." "Yes," she admitted, her voice trembling despite herself. "I feel it all." He leaned in, brushing his lips lightly against hers, not a kiss, not yet, but a promise of what could come. The sensation was exquisite, a delicate tension that left her breathless and craving more. She tilted her head, closing her eyes, letting herself be drawn into the moment, letting the alley, the shadows, and his presence envelop her completely. A sudden noise, perhaps a loose shutter in the wind, made her start, heart leaping. But he held her tighter, grounding her with his presence. "Let them watch," he said, voice a low rumble. "Let the world see shadows and think they understand. They don't. They'll never understand what happens here." She felt her pulse quicken, the thrill of secrecy intensifying everything. Every nerve in her body seemed to respond to his touch, his proximity, the tension that had been building since the moment she stepped into the alley. There was no pretense here, no masks, only raw, unfiltered connection. Slowly, deliberately, he pressed his forehead to hers, lips brushing against the corner of her mouth, teasing, testing. The contact was electric, sending sparks up her spine, awakening desires she had barely acknowledged. She leaned into him instinctively, the world outside the alley fading completely. "I want this," she whispered, not sure if she meant the closeness, the danger, or the surrender itself. "I know," he said, voice husky, a hand tracing the line of her jaw down to her neck. "And I want it too. All of it. Every shadow, every secret, every heartbeat in the dark." The mist thickened further, swirling around them like a living curtain, obscuring their forms from the city beyond. The alley had become a sanctuary, a hidden world where boundaries blurred and every sensation was magnified. The tension between them was a living thing now, pulsing and insistent, a magnetic force neither could resist. She shivered, a mixture of cold, anticipation, and longing, feeling the closeness of him in every sense. In the hidden shadows, where no one else could intrude, she realized something terrifying and exhilarating: she was no longer in control, and she didn't want to be. The alleyway held them, suspended in time, the rain, the mist, and the darkness conspiring to make them theirs and theirs alone. And as their bodies drew even closer, as the invisible line of restraint began to dissolve, she knew that crossing it would change everything. But she was ready. The mist hung thick in the alley, curling around their bodies like a living thing, as though the shadows themselves were conspiring to keep them hidden. Her breath came in uneven gasps, heart hammering in her chest, echoing off the wet brick walls. Every instinct screamed caution, yet she felt an irresistible pull to him, a force that was both thrilling and terrifying. He cupped her face with both hands, thumbs brushing over damp skin, and she leaned into the touch, eyes half-lidded. "You shouldn't be here," he murmured, the words barely audible over the soft patter of residual rain. "Not alone, and certainly not with me." She swallowed hard, the ache of desire mingling with the thrill of fear. "I'm not alone," she whispered, and the words carried more weight than she expected. Being with him here, in this hidden passage, made everything else disappear: the city, the rules, the life she left behind just beyond the alley. All that mattered was the tight, insistent heat of him, the way his presence pressed against her senses. "Good," he said, a low, satisfied murmur that vibrated against her ear. "Because once you're here, there's no turning back. The shadows, they change people. They reveal things they hide during the day." She shivered, feeling the truth in his words. There was a raw honesty in darkness, a vulnerability that daylight refused. And she realized she wanted to explore that honesty with him, to let the alley strip away pretenses until all that was left was them, raw and unguarded. He leaned closer, lips brushing her temple, then the side of her jaw, and the contact ignited a fire she could not contain. Her hands moved instinctively, tracing the lines of his shoulders beneath his coat, memorizing the warmth of him through soaked fabric. His fingers danced along her waist, then her back, pulling her into a rhythm neither of them named, but both recognized. A sudden noise shattered the fragile cocoon of intimacy: a sharp clatter of metal from the far end of the alley. She stiffened, pulse spiking. "Someone's there," she whispered, voice trembling. He tensed as well, eyes scanning the shadowed passage beyond, muscles coiled and alert. "Maybe," he admitted, though there was a hint of a smirk on his lips, "or maybe the shadows just want to test us." She wanted to protest, to insist on caution, but something in the way he held her, in the heat radiating from his body, muted the fear. The risk only intensified the thrill, like fire licking at the edges of a delicate silk. "Do you trust me enough?" he asked, voice low and commanding, forcing her to meet his gaze. There was no mockery, no teasing, now only raw, undeniable intensity. "I trust you," she breathed, and the words felt like a surrender, an offering to the night and the hidden world they occupied. He smiled, a dangerous glint in his eyes, and pulled her closer, pressing his lips to hers in a kiss that was sudden and demanding, leaving no space for hesitation. Her body reacted instantly, arching into him, lips parting, breath mingling with his in the cold, damp air. The alley seemed to pulse around them, the shadows deepening, as if the darkness itself approved of what was unfolding. The kiss broke briefly, leaving them both panting, foreheads pressed together. "Do you feel it?" he whispered, voice rough with need. "The alley, the danger, it's ours now." "Yes," she admitted, trembling from more than the chill. "I feel it. All of it." He traced a finger down her jaw, then along her neck, sending shivers racing through her body. "Good," he murmured. "Because tonight, the shadows will show us things we've never dared to explore. Every secret, every desire, laid bare." Her pulse quickened as he pressed closer again, hands exploring, lips teasing the sensitive curve of her neck. The rain-slick bricks seemed to vanish under the intensity, the mist wrapping around them like a private world of their own making. Every touch, every whispered word, heightened the tension, drawing them deeper into an intoxicating rhythm of danger and desire. Then, a faint voice echoed from the entrance of the alley, distant but unmistakable. "Hey! Who's there?" She froze, and he stiffened, his hand tightening around her wrist as though anchoring her to reality. The thrill of secrecy collided with the reality of exposure, a jolt of adrenaline that sharpened every nerve. The shadows had given them a sanctuary, but the city beyond reminded them that danger was never far. "Stay close," he whispered, lips brushing hers in a fleeting, almost desperate kiss. "No matter what." And in that instant, with the mist curling around them and the distant voice growing louder, she knew that the alleyway full of shadows, secrets, and temptation was no longer just a place of forbidden intimacy. It had become a stage for something far more dangerous, far more thrilling, and far more real than either of them had anticipated. She shivered again, but this time, it was not fear alone. It was anticipation, the pulse of risk, and the undeniable magnetism that bound them together in the hidden world of the alley. And she had no intention of letting go. The voice had grown louder, echoing down the alley like an intrusion into their private world. Her pulse spiked, a mixture of fear and thrill twisting through her chest. She pressed closer to him instinctively, feeling the warmth of his body like armor against the cold dampness and the threat that approached. "They're coming," she whispered, voice trembling. The words felt absurdly inadequate to describe the surge of adrenaline coursing through her veins. The alley had been a sanctuary, a playground of shadows and stolen intimacy, but now it was a stage for a danger she hadn't anticipated. He didn't speak immediately, only tightened his hold, his hands steady, commanding, grounding her. "Not yet," he murmured, lips brushing her temple, "but we'll make it ours while we can." His eyes, dark and intense, scanned the misty darkness beyond, calculating, always 2 steps ahead. The footsteps grew closer, uneven, clumsy against the wet cobblestones. Whoever it was, they didn't belong here, they were outsiders, intruders. But instead of fear, she felt a heady thrill, the collision of danger and desire feeding something primal inside her. Her fingers traced along his chest, finding the taut muscles beneath his coat, seeking reassurance, and the brush of fabric against fabric sent sparks of heat across her skin. "Stay behind me," he commanded softly, voice low and authoritative. "Don't move unless I tell you to." She nodded, swallowing hard, entranced by the mixture of control and surrender, the way he moved with instinctive grace in a world they didn't fully own yet. He was part predator, part protector, all magnetic force, and she was helpless against the pull he exerted. A shadow emerged at the far end of the alley, a figure, blurred by distance and mist. They carried something heavy, the faint glint of metal catching what little light the street beyond provided. Her stomach tightened, nerves coiling. He pressed her back against the wall, one hand tracing her spine, grounding her even as the tension spiked. "Relax," he whispered, "but keep your senses open." His thumb brushed the nape of her neck in a gesture both intimate and commanding, and she shivered despite herself. The intruder's voice called again, louder, sharper, "I know someone's there. Come out now." He exhaled slowly, tilting her chin up. "They don't understand," he said, voice low, almost intimate, "that shadows aren't just hiding places, they're revelations. And right now, you're mine, even if they can't see it." Her breath hitched. There was danger here, yes, but also an undeniable, intoxicating intensity. Every nerve in her body was on fire, every touch, every brush of his fingers, every whispered word heightened the thrill. The fear sharpened the desire, made it more electric, more impossible to resist. He moved with swift precision, slipping through the mist as if it were water, placing himself between her and the intruder. "Go," he instructed, voice commanding but soft, a strange contrast that sent shivers down her spine. "Now, follow my lead." Her legs were trembling, heart hammering, but she obeyed, moving as he guided her further into the depths of the alley. The mist cloaked them, wrapping around their bodies, hiding them from the outside world, amplifying every sensation, the brush of his coat against hers, the warmth of his hands on her back, the heat that radiated from their proximity. "You feel it too, don't you?" he murmured, pressing close enough that her ear caught the rasp of his breath. "The tension, the danger, the pull of it all." "Yes," she gasped, words trembling on her lips. "All of it? I feel it all." He smiled, a slow, dark curve of lips that made her shiver. "Good," he said. "Because nothing is more alive than being on the edge, nothing more real than this, the risk, the fire, the shadows watching, waiting, knowing what we dare to do." Her body pressed instinctively against his as they moved deeper into the alley, the world beyond a distant hum. The mist swirled around them like a cloak, heightening the sense of intimacy, danger, and unspoken promise. Every touch was magnified, every breath shared, every heartbeat synchronized in the clandestine rhythm of desire and survival. The intruder's footsteps faded, replaced by silence, thick and expectant. She exhaled shakily, leaning into him, aware that every nerve still tingled, that the thrill of exposure lingered like fire across her skin. He brushed a damp strand of hair from her face, thumb lingering at her cheekbone. "See," he murmured, voice rough, almost predatory. "Shadows aren't just hiding places, they're revelation. And tonight, they've revealed us." She closed her eyes, letting the tension, the danger, and the lingering intimacy wash over her. The alleyway, with its mist and shadows, its rain-slicked stones and hidden corners, had become more than a place. It was a crucible where desire and danger fused, where every sensation, every heartbeat, every touch counted. And she knew, with a certainty that made her tremble, that she was irrevocably lost to it and to him. The mist had begun to lift slightly, but the alley still held its suffocating intimacy. Every sound, drip, echo, distant hum of traffic felt amplified, as if the city itself were leaning in to watch, to witness what unfolded in its shadowed veins. Her heart pounded in rhythm with his steps, quick and uneven, yet measured, controlled, pulling her deeper into the secret world he had created for them. "You need to stay close," he whispered, voice low and commanding, brushing damp hair from her face. "Not just for now, but for everything that's coming." She swallowed hard, her breath trembling as her chest rose and fell. I will," she murmured, instinctively pressing herself into him, seeking the warmth and certainty of his presence. The alleyway had become more than just a hidden passage. It was a crucible, a space where desire, fear, and the unspoken rules of reality collided. He guided her to a recessed corner, where shadows pooled so densely that even the faintest neon glow couldn't touch it. There, pressed close together, they became silhouettes in a painting of darkness and mist, bodies intertwined, hearts hammering, breaths mingling. "I can feel you," he murmured, lips brushing her temple, down her jaw, each contact light yet incendiary. "Every shiver, every heartbeat, every hesitation, it all tells me more than words ever could." Her hands roamed the line of his back, tracing over soaked fabric, memorizing warmth through layers, her body aching for contact she dared not fully claim yet. The fear of discovery, of exposure, only sharpened the ache, intensifying the intimacy of the stolen touches, the stolen breaths, the unspoken communication that passed between them like fire through dry tinder. A sudden movement in the distance, a shadow, a sound, a flicker made her freeze, breath catching. He pressed his hand to her spine, grounding her, anchoring her, his own eyes scanning the darkness like a predator on alert. "Not now," he said softly, yet firmly. "We own this moment. Everything else is irrelevant." Her knees weakened, heart hammering as his lips found hers in a kiss that was demanding yet slow, teasing yet consuming. The alley echoed with the faint whisper of their bodies moving, the soft shuffle of wet shoes against stone, the press of heat and breath and longing. "Do you feel it?" he murmured, pulling back just enough to meet her gaze. "The way the shadows wrap around us? The way they make everything sharper, more dangerous, more alive?" "Yes," she breathed, voice trembling. "I feel it, all of it. And I don't want it to end." He smiled, a slow, dark curve that sent another shiver racing down her spine. "Good," he murmured, tracing a finger along her jaw, down her neck. "Because it won't. Not tonight. Not while the shadows are ours." The thrill of secrecy, of hidden intimacy, heightened every nerve. She felt alive in a way she hadn't in years. The risk, the danger, the fire of his proximity, each touch magnified, each brush of skin igniting a spark that raced along her nerves. Every heartbeat was a drumbeat of anticipation, every inhalation an electric pulse shared between them. The faint echo of distant footsteps reminded them that the city beyond the alley remained, indifferent and watchful. But here, in the depths of shadow and mist, rules ceased to matter. Time slowed, senses sharpened, and every sensation became urgent, intense, undeniable. He pressed closer again, lips teasing along her collarbone, fingers exploring the curve of her waist, pulling her into the rhythm of tension and release, danger and desire. Her knees buckled slightly, breath catching, as he held her steady, commanding, yet tender, a perfect balance of predator and sanctuary. "You're not afraid," he murmured against her ear. "Not really. You crave this, the risk, the fire, the unknown. And that's why we're here." She trembled, a mixture of desire and fear coursing through her. I crave it," she admitted, voice barely a whisper. "I crave you." He let the words linger, savoring them, pressing a final, lingering kiss to her lips before pulling back just enough to meet her gaze. "Then don't let go," he said, voice low, almost a growl. "Not tonight, not ever. Let the shadows guide you, let them show you everything we've never dared to explore." The mist swirled around them like a living shroud, the alleyway alive with anticipation, tension, and raw, unfiltered intimacy. Every brush of skin, every whispered word, every heartbeat shared was amplified, a crescendo building toward a point neither of them could predict, yet both instinctively desired. In that space between shadow and light, danger and desire, she knew one thing with absolute certainty: she was lost to him, to the night, to the fire that burned between them, and she would never want to be found. The shadows had claimed them and they had willingly surrendered. The alley was quieter now, the mist thinning into a faint drizzle that clung to their hair and coats like a memory of the storm that had passed. Their breaths mingled in the damp air, shallow and quick, hearts still hammering from the tension that had built like an invisible weight pressing against their bodies. Every shadow seemed to pulse with lingering energy, every brick a silent witness to the surrender they had offered to one another. He pressed her back against the wall, hands framing her face, fingers threading through her wet hair. She tilted her head, eyes half closed, intoxicated by proximity, by the lingering taste of him, by the electricity that refused to dissipate. The alley had become a crucible for them, a world outside time and reason, and neither could resist the pull any longer. "You've given yourself to this," he murmured, voice low, rough, each word vibrating against her chest. "To me. To the shadows. To the fire we've lit." Her lips parted, breath shaky, and she could only nod. Words would have been useless here. They were too small, too ordinary to convey the intensity of everything: desire, fear, exhilaration, surrender, all compressed into this narrow, rain-slicked world that belonged only to them. He leaned in, lips brushing hers, soft at first, then insistent, demanding. Her fingers tangled in his coat, pulling him closer, feeling the taut strength of his body beneath layers of damp fabric, feeling the heat of him radiate through every nerve ending. Every touch, every whispered word, every heartbeat was amplified, the shadows around them swallowing everything else, leaving only this, only them. A sudden movement in the far end of the alley, a shadow, indistinct, blurred by mist, made her gasp, eyes widening. He caught her hand, grounding her with the magnetic certainty of his presence. "Not now," he whispered, pressing a finger to her lips. "Nothing can touch us here. Not tonight." The intruder, or perhaps the city itself, remained outside. Inside the alley, in this cocoon of shadows and mist, they had no rules, no boundaries. Every stolen kiss, every grazing touch, every shiver and moan belonged only to them. She could feel the tension coiling inside her, ready to snap, ready to ignite, and he matched it, attuned to her every reaction, every quiver. He pressed his forehead to hers, breathing mingling, warmth radiating through her chest, through her core. "You're mine," he murmured, not possessively, but with certainty, with reverence. "And I'm yours." She shivered, trembling with desire and adrenaline, and whispered, "Yes. I'm yours." A soft laugh escaped him, low and intimate, and he brushed a damp strand of hair from her face before lowering his lips to hers once more. The kiss deepened, slow and consuming, a perfect blend of urgency and patience, danger and surrender. Every inch of space between them seemed charged, electric, alive. The alley itself seemed to pulse with the rhythm of their connection, the rain-soaked stones holding the memory of every touch, every heartbeat, every stolen whisper. They pulled back briefly, foreheads pressed together, breaths ragged and mingled. "We've crossed the line," he murmured, voice husky. "There's no going back. Not after this." She nodded, pulse still racing, chest tight with anticipation and something darker, something thrillingly forbidden. "I don't want to go back," she admitted, voice soft, trembling. I want this." He smiled then, slow and knowing, hands sliding down her arms to press at her waist, pulling her impossibly close. "Then let's make it ours," he whispered, voice rough with need and something more intimate, something that went beyond desire into connection, into trust, into surrender. The shadows deepened around them, embracing them, amplifying the intensity of the moment. The mist swirled like a veil, obscuring everything else, leaving them suspended in time and space, two bodies intertwined, hearts beating in sync, senses electrified, every nerve alive with the fire of proximity and danger. She trembled as he pressed closer again, lips tracing the curve of her neck, shoulders, the sensitive line of her collarbone, each touch igniting sparks that ran through her entire body. She leaned into him, surrendering completely, reveling in the intensity of the fire they had created, knowing the world beyond the alley did not matter, could not reach them here. In that moment, the city, the rain, the neon lights, the distant hum of life all faded. There was only shadow, only mist, only the undeniable, unrelenting connection between them. Finally, he pressed a lingering kiss to her lips, slow, deliberate, sealing the surrender, the danger, the desire that had consumed them both. She responded with equal fervor, body and mind and soul entwined in the shadows, fully alive, fully claimed, fully lost and loving every second of it. As the mist curled around them and the alley embraced their heat, she realized the truth: some lines were meant to be crossed, some shadows were meant to be explored, and some fires once ignited could never be extinguished. And in the secret world of the alleyway, with the city oblivious beyond, they had discovered something timeless: danger, desire, and each other, entwined forever in the shadows.